passing away, resting in peace, climbing the stairway to heaven. These are just some of the terms we use to avoid talking about death. Aged care is framed in terms of life and the living. But where does that leave us when it comes to the end of someone's story? It's difficult to know the right time to talk to a resident about death. Sometimes it's because you don't want to upset them. Often it's because you don't feel comfortable having the conversation. So what do you do when a client brings this up? Do you try to distract them, change the subject? Or do you stop what you're doing, sit down and allow the resident to speak? This was the dilemma faced by a care worker in the play 4 Funerals in One Day.
I want you and me to have a little talk in private.
Okay.
I'm dying, right?
Well,
No, don't let's beat around the bush. I'm dying. I'm terminal. Finito. Kaput, right?
Well, it's not really for me to say.
Well, it is for me to say, and that's why I'm saying it. I'm all washed up. Now, hear me out. I'm as good as gone. All they're doing is keeping me alive. It's a waste of drugs, waste of money, waste of everybody's time.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I do, and that's why I'm telling you. I'm a burden on the community, the family, the bloody health system. I can't contribute to anything. I'm cactus.
In many cases, the care worker isn't sure what to say.
When a resident talks to me about dying, which happens, it's quite common in the home here, I find it very confronting, difficult, because you never know what the right thing to say is.
Healthcare professional Molly Carlisle says we all have fears and anxieties about death.
Care workers are often reluctant to have conversations about death and dying with older people particularly, because they're fearful that it might make them give up.
When a resident asks me what's after death or what comes, the only thing I can think of, they might be scared, they might be feeling that they're probably close to die and they want a bit of reassurance of what's going to happen after.
I find it quite confronting when a resident wants to talk to me about their death, because I think that they find it quite hard to comprehend and to deal with themselves.
The reality is, most people who try and initiate a conversation about death and dying have been thinking about it for a long time, and they're just waiting for someone to give them that opportunity. If they don't get that opportunity, they may never be able to tell their story.
I have no problem, because it comes to us all, so there's no secret about it all, and I think it's much better to come out with it instead of getting it all inside you and bothering you. I'm quite happy to talk.
I find the topic of death somewhat difficult to understand. Is there a life after death? I think it's harder for us to grasp it now than, say, it was for my grandparents, who were deeply religious. And, you know, we've got so much to cope with in the papers and the news every day about these religions and what they're doing with other human beings. And I would say, well, how do we handle that?
I would just try to talk to them, ask them what do they think is going to happen, and try to reassure their beliefs instead of mine.
It's nice to be able to talk to them about it and work through it, but it is a touchy subject, and I think, yeah, can be quite difficult sometimes.
Hearing these people's life story is amazing. Most of them have travelled the world. They've come from different parts of the world, come here to settle down and build their future and their families. They've succeeded in many things, and they've told me about how they've suffered before and their fears and their joys and what makes them happy, and these are all things to help me to better look after them.
I suppose one of the best and significant phone calls we received was from Bertie Oldfield, the old Australian wicketkeeper, who said to me one evening, would I take a team to Ethiopia? I said, Bertie, don't be daft. They don't play cricket. No, he said, that's the point. Sticks and stones, and we've got to teach them to throw cricket bats and balls. So in the long run, I said yes. My eldest girl is a primary school teacher. And one of the carers said when I first arrived, does your daughter teach at St Luke's? And I said, yes, she does. And she said she taught me when I was 4.
To disguise concern or discomfort, the care worker can try to put on a brave face, sometimes unsuccessfully.
When my first patient died, I'd never even seen a dead body before, and I had to lay her out. I got off duty and I rang Mum and I said, I've got to come home. And she said, well, you can't come home in this condition. I don't want you driving like that. And I said, I'm coming home. I don't care. I got in the car and I bawled all the way home. When I got in the front door, my mum took one look at me and she said, oh, you've just had your first death. And then years later, when my kids were a bit older, I thought I could fool anybody. I came in one day and the little one said, oh, you've had a few die today, have you, Mum? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you've always got that face on when more than one person dies in a day. And I said, what face? And he said, that face.
Over the years, she learned to mask that face.
I have to create my own boundaries. Otherwise, I would have never made it to the next one. Call it professional detachment with maximum involvement.
Older people often find themselves in a situation where conversations about death are happening all around them and they're completely excluded from the process. So not only do they not get to contribute, but then it starts to make them fearful of what's being planned and what's being discussed without their input.
In our situation, where I believe we're both fully in control of our faculties, we can make the decision anyhow. We don't need someone to sort of point us in that direction and suggest that we consider it.
It takes a lot of courage for an older person to initiate a conversation about death and dying and about the stuff that matters to them. It takes a lot of time and they've thought about it a lot. And if no one's prepared to sit and listen to that conversation or engage in that conversation, they may never ever get to talk about the stuff that matters for them.
No, I haven't had that conversation with them. But they're great girls. And despite the age difference between them and we residents, I appreciate the way the nurses here cope with us.
When you look at the overall situation where we're not all at the same level of comprehension, then I think it's again very important and for people who, for example, may need the advice of family members also to make that decision or to encourage them to consider it, then I think the fact that it's raised by the people here who obviously have the best of intentions in looking after the residents, I think it's an excellent situation to be in, that they are made aware that sometime this is going to happen, and in those circumstances that you either make a decision that is of your choice or you face what could be a very traumatic decision at some time in the future when you're just not, in my mind, in a mental state to face it.
Just because you're a care worker doesn't mean you have to have all the answers, but it does mean you have to be prepared to share that space with someone who invites you into it.
I've worked here for quite some time, and of course you build up a relationship with these people. They become, you know, almost part of my family. I have conversations with them and I know all about their life.
As a care worker, knowing the resident, knowing what their interests are, knowing about their life, you can give better care into their end-of-life plan and making them as comfortable as possible and as happy as possible to the very end.
It's good to know what their beliefs are because you'll be able to reassure and know. I think residents come with different cultures, different backgrounds, and things like what happens after death is so important for them that having someone to share that and somebody that would reassure and affirm what they believe it's something very important to keep them calm, to be happy and try to collaborate or help as much as you want in whatever they want to achieve before that happens.
It's not about care workers getting older people sitting around a table and saying, now we're going to talk about death. It's about creating a safe space, a space of trust, and allowing conversations to naturally evolve. And that may happen in a group or it may happen one-on-one.
Trying to fix fragmented families is a common mistake because you're only seeing part of the picture.
As care workers, the temptation is to try and fix problems for people all the time. But in reality, often that's us imposing our set of values onto someone else.
We have to resist the temptation to make judgments about people. I mean, we just don't see the big picture. We just see a small snapshot of people's lives when they're at their most vulnerable.
But there are ways to widen this frame of reference. Social worker Patty Khan has set up a program at Sir Moses Montefiore to open the lines of communication.
At the Montefiore home, our aim is to create opportunities for all our residents and their families to talk about advanced care planning. That is to have conversations about how they would want to be treated at the end of life if they were ever in a situation where they had lost capacity and weren't able to make decisions for them at that time.
Hi, Joyce.
It's usually the care workers and the staff members and the nurses who residents turn to have these conversations. Often there are a series of conversations involving the GP, their specialist, the family, the resident, to get to a point where they feel comfortable to document their wishes. Some residents and families choose not to document, but in our view it's the conversations that are really what's most important, because the conversations create a foundation for decision making that they might need to make later on. The conversations actually create a window for us into the family dynamics, and we can see really early on whether there's likelihood that there may be conflict between family members and residents in the event that they need to make difficult decisions.
When this conversation first started, I was very uncomfortable. It wasn't easy to start with. But as it continued, I started relaxing, and I think at this moment one must realize that it's one's attitude to life also affects this decision.
Going through this process has really settled me a lot. And it settled me because it's empowered me to carry out my mum's wishes. It's allowed me to feel that the action I'm taking is because my mother's asked me to do that. And it's even brought into my awareness that it's how quickly she's allowing me to act on her wishes. So instead of being uncertain about the actions I was taking, I can feel very empowered to carry out her wishes with certainty and know that they're not just my wishes, but they're hers.
I have an advanced care plan. It's really the same as my wife, who died only a few weeks ago. And we both went to the same church, and we have a little nook in the little wall where our ashes are put, and there are 3 little holes, one for my daughter and the other 2 for us. So we have no problems about any planning.
It's very, very hard on people to have to make decisions for someone when they haven't got a clue what that person wants. We have the mechanisms now in every state and territory of Australia for people to firstly appoint someone to make decisions for them, and that's called something different in every state and territory, but it's a substitute decision maker of your choice, and then to empower that person by writing an advance directive, by writing down your wishes in a document which says, this is what I value, in this scenario I would want this or that. If I'm in the terminal phase of a terminal illness, do or don't do the following things. Those sorts of things are very, very important.
I have said I don't want anyone standing in the church giving a eulogy about me if they're not seeing me, talking with me, ignoring me while I'm alive. Because if that happened, I think I'd jump out of that box and give someone a clout.
While advanced care planning gives residents some control over end of life, it's not euthanasia.
I've got this old man. He's one of my first patients and he wants to be euthanized.
Oh. What else is new?
No, they won't let you do it officially, but that's my point. There are ways, Karen, my girl. There are ways, eh? Now, I know you're new, and that's my point. Your head's not full of all that bureaucratic bullshit. You can still see that what I'm saying is just so logical. So, that's what I want you to do for me. And trust me, when I'm gone, I won't tell anybody.
Well, he feels he's a burden, he's not able to contribute, doesn't want people to worry about him and sees no value in the time he has left. And he keeps going on about other societies where euthanasia is accepted.
If I was an Eskimo, you'd know what they do with me? They have the best recycling system. They stick me out in the snow for the polar bears to eat me, then they eat the polar bears. It's brilliant.
When a person makes a statement like, I just want to die, it's imperative for the care worker to explore that with them. What do they actually mean by that? They may have physical pain that's not being managed appropriately, or they may have emotional or psychological or spiritual pain even. They may feel like they're out of control or that their life isn't worth anything anymore. And it's up to us as care workers to work that through with them and to enable them to regain control of the life that they have left.
Oh, and who's this?
Oh, look, if you won't give me peace in the next life, at least give me some in this. Ah, that's my grandfather. He ran away at the age of 16 to fight in the Boer War. Now, he's been happily dead for 100 years.
Another issue for staff is families often are in denial. They don't want the person to die, and so they're thinking that they want everything done. Part of the problem there is that that's the wrong time to be asking people, what do you want?
We had discussed this before we even came here, and we thought, well, it was better than having that we don't want to be kept alive just on life support when there was no quality of life. And also we didn't want any pressure on our son to have to decide. So we decided that was the best way to go.
As care workers, we have a responsibility to get to know ourselves first before we try and get to know the people that we're working with. It's only by knowing our own fears and anxieties that we tap into our intuition, and that's what tells us when someone else is ready to have a difficult conversation.
death does scare me, not so much for myself, it's who I'm leaving behind. I have 2 children, and I think that would be the most frightening thing, to leave my children behind.
The next step for us is to actually listen to that intuition and to respond to it. So when we get a feeling that someone needs to talk to us about something that may make us feel uncomfortable, we need to stop what we're doing, sit down, listen, and allow the person to express what it is that they need to express at that time. Because most of the time, if we're feeling anxious, you can be guaranteed that they're feeling really anxious. And by offering that invitation, we can provide a sense of support to the people we work with.
Clary, it seems no one in your family knows about these wonderful stories, and well, they must be important to you, otherwise you wouldn't carry this with you all the time. Look, you say I have no right to keep you alive. Well, I say you shouldn't die without passing on these stories, at least to your grandchildren. So you better hurry up and get on with it.
All right, I've had me little lecture. Now, if you're not going to do what I ask you, nick off and leave me alone in my little torture chamber.
There's no good age to die. I know people here that are 90 plus, some are hitting 100 plus, and they're still very able, they're ambulant, they're social, they love life, and I think because they have suffered so much in their life, they continue to want to grasp and enjoy anything they can.
We often think of our own lives as being quite ordinary, and yet to someone else, they may appear anything but. How do we find that out about each other? How do we find out about the people we work with? It's only through sharing our personal stories that we enable people to talk about the things that they value, to talk about the meaning of their life, and to talk about their legacy. We need to think about this too as care workers. What are the things we're going to leave behind?
No life is a waste, Clary. It might be in your eyes, but in your kids' eyes, well, they might have a completely different idea of your value. The old bugger's getting ready to die, but he won't talk to us. They might even want to tell you they love you. And that might end up being the only sense you make of your life, but to me, that's a whole lot better than nothing. You can leave a footprint, however small. Anyway, I'll be off.
What's your hurry?
The value I can add for the resident is that as much as I get to know them and as much as I get to understand them and their background, the better care I can give to them, the more personalized care and more quality of life we can give them.
There's absolutely no reason why staff on the floor can't engage with their residents, have these conversations, and help those residents through with the process of expressing their wishes and their needs.
We're just a couple who've been together for 66 years to date, and we've had our tough times and good times like everybody else, and enjoyed our life.
Despite the fact that these are difficult conversations, in our experience we find that given the right environment, with the right support and the right information, families and residents welcome the opportunity to talk about their advanced care planning.
Helping someone die without pain in this day and age isn't all that hard, but helping them find the value in the life they've lived, that's really important. Someone once said to me, "It's not death I fear, it's facing it with regret, that I've left things unfinished, that I could have done better."